Hello and welcome back to London Cycle Routes. Today I'll be showing you how to cycle from Brockley in South London to Forest Hill. This ride takes about 15 minutes and you can do the whole thing on quiet streets and protected cycle lanes. By public transport, the same journey also takes around 15 minutes, so cycling is a good way to make the trip. If you find this video useful or you just enjoy watching it, then don't forget to subscribe to the channel on YouTube, as I try to post new videos just like it every week. I'd also like to say a big thank you to everyone who supports the channel on Patreon. If you'd like to contribute as well, you can find the link in the description below the video. Alright, let's get going. So we're starting on Colgate Street next to Brockley Station, and the first thing you'll see is that this is a lovely public space. It was created by a road closure during the COVID pandemic, and the local council, Lewisham, is planning to make it permanent and make a few further changes by adding things like a bit more greenery. I think it's a really nice addition to the area and it creates a little bit of a village focal point to Brockley. The road closure also gives a nice traffic-free start to our route today. To get to Forest Hill, we're mostly going to be cycling on very quiet streets, which are quiet because of a mix of their natural layout, but also because of historic traffic management schemes. Today we would call these schemes low traffic neighbourhoods or something like that, but they've actually been in for decades and I'll point them out as we pass them. Today's route is relatively straight and mostly follows the course of the railway, which is the Brighton Main Line if you're interested, though there is a short section where things don't quite connect up and we have to cross the railway to get where we need to go. But if you looked at the journey time comparisons at the beginning of the video, it's pretty much similar to getting the train, and when you're making the journey, that's generally what matters. You can see all sorts of signs that the streets around here are nice and quiet. One is that the postman just there on our left is delivering mail by cart, which he feels confident just wheeling in the middle of the road. The reason for that is because of this fire gate here, which is part of one of those traffic management schemes I talked about. That would have been put in maybe 30-40 years ago, and it's there to prevent traffic from rat running through the back streets and to keep it on the main road. As a result, cycling on these streets is a lot quieter and more pleasant than going down the B218, which is the main road that runs parallel here. It's also no slower, as it's quite a direct route, with a very small exception that we're going to see as we go around this corner. Because there's no pathway between these houses, we're going to turn right and cross the railway here, and then about 30 seconds later we'll cross it back in the other direction to essentially get around those houses. It's kind of annoying, but it's still better than going on the main road, I think. This railway is the Brighton Main Line, which carries services from Victoria all the way down to the south coast, as you might expect Brighton and other cities and towns as well. And it also carries London Overground services down to West Croydon. So if you've ever been on any of those trains, then you've been through there before. For now we're going to cut up Turnham Road, which is a relatively quiet estate road and doesn't tend to have much traffic on it, although there is quite a lot of parking and you might run into the odd car accessing the estate. And then at the end of here we're going to turn left and go over the railway again and rejoin that straight line that we were cutting following along the Brighton Main Line. If you wanted to adapt this route to go towards Peckham Rye, then you would turn right here, and the streets aren't hugely quiet, but they are just about doable, I think. Instead though, we're going to turn left today into what is essentially a cul-de-sac. On the right there you can see the entrance to Camberwell New Cemetery, although we're not actually that near Camberwell itself. The left hand side of this bridge is for pedestrians and the right hand side is for cyclists going in both directions. Be careful along here, as if you look at the ground at the entrance here, you'll see that it actually is marked as if it's a one-way path, so you might occasionally find people cycling down there as if they own the whole path coming in the opposite direction. I think that really needs to be repainted, as sending mixed messages coming in the opposite directions actually is really dangerous and encourages people to essentially crash into each other. But we're back on the quiet streets now, and it's really the same story as before. There isn't really any through traffic on here, and the only cars that you're likely to see are people accessing the homes. As we go around this corner, you'll find yourself on Courtrai Road, and that's an interesting name. It's actually a name of a city, although you probably don't recognise it, as it's not usually called that these days. On a map it would be Kortrijk with a K and a J, which is the Dutch name, as it is a Dutch speaking area of Belgium. It's really common for place names in the Dutch-speaking part of Belgium to be known by their French names in English. The same is true of Bruges and Ypres, and the reason for that is that French was for a long time the language of the Belgian elite, no matter which part of Belgium you were in. So the English basically picked it up, whether that was through trading links in the Middle Ages or because a lot of English people spent a lot of time in Flanders during the First World War, as is the case in Ypres. But back to the cycling, at the end of the street we see another road closure with another fire gate. One thing that would be a great improvement here would be some kind of crossing over the road to get us onto this street here, as it is quite a wait for a gap in the traffic and the road is quite wide. But once you're on it again, it's actually really quite quiet and a really pleasant cycle, as you can see. There's another filter coming up around this corner, and it would be great to see at some stage a redesign of a filter like this and also some of the others that we've been through to be a bit more in line with modern standards. It's pretty unusual for new LTNs to use fire gates like that across the whole of the street, as they're not very accessible to people maybe riding adapted cycles if they're disabled or using cargo bikes. Generally, the gaps left either side of the gate aren't particularly wide and it can be a bit of a squeeze to get through. It's also a good opportunity to introduce a bit of greenery. Most permanent filters introduced these days would have at least a little bit of planting or a few trees just to make the street look a bit nicer, and I think given how much asphalt and parking there is around here, it would also make a big difference around here if we could do that on some of the filters that we passed through today. Other neighbouring councils in this area like Lambeth have started to turn some of their temporary low traffic neighbourhoods put in during COVID into permanent measures, and as they've done that, they've also done that with the filters, and there's some good examples there which are just being finished off right now that I can't wait to show off over the next few months in some good videos, and I'll point them out as we go past. Often they create a nice little bit of public space. See, this is another filter that could really do with improving. It looks a little bit unloved and it could really be a nice little pedestrian plaza with some seating or something like that. As we go around the corner here, there's actually a little protected cycle lane that we're going to ride in. The street is one way except for this cycle lane, which lets you go both ways on a bike. It's always great to see protected infrastructure, although this lane is a little bit on the narrow side and I think some wider cycles like cargo bikes might struggle to get through it. It's also pretty close to the door zone of the parking that runs alongside it. It would be good to have a little bit of a gap between the parking spaces and the lane itself so that people don't open their door into you. We're pretty much here now. I'm just going to use this toucan crossing here to cross the road, and yeah, we find ourselves right in the middle of Forest Hill on Perryvale. So that's pretty much it. That's a really local route, and you know, I don't think a lot of people are necessarily going to be commuting. You might work in Brockley and live in Forest Hill or vice versa, but I think for a lot of people that would be a route that you might use to get down to, you know, one of the cafes on Colgate Street or pop to the shops or something like that. It's a quick, free, and above all just fun alternative to getting between these two local town centres. If you enjoyed that, don't forget to hit subscribe on YouTube, as I do post new videos like it every week. And if you really like what we're doing on the channel, you could always consider contributing to the Patreon. Thanks so much to everyone who already does it. If you don't already, there's a link in the description below the video. Thanks very much, and I'll see you guys again next time.